On January 17th, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, released the following statement. As you can see here, highlighted in the red, he says that the existence of an independent state on historically Russian territories will be constant cause for conflict in the region. What, in terms of, I guess, primordialism, how is this justification for violence, for conflict, for getting engaged in a different region? What do you think?
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, I think the constant reference to, ancient history from a primordialist perspective is very risky. That's why, as an IR specialist, I avoid primordialist approach to any issue of international relations, and especially when I'm dealing with Central Asia. Well, Medvedev's statement, in my opinion, is very cynical and hypocritical. Actually, it's neither the first nor the last statement. I'm sure he will make some other provocative statements. He will never stop himself. And that's why we shouldn't be so much surprised of such provocative, cynical statements. Well, it is actually one of the manifestations of the overall war rhetoric, which is so peculiar to the Russian political establishment throughout the last 2 years. I would even say not 2 years and longer. It is so specific, so peculiar to Russian political lexicon, war rhetoric, and how Putin and his people, including Medvedev, have tried to justify war.
С точки зрения исторических перспектив и стратегических интересов российского государства, даже через 10, через 15 лет это неприемлемо.
So it was this kind of rhetoric was full of controversial tricks and fakes. That's why I just said in the beginning that the reference to history, primordial approach, is always risky and full of wrong information. Well, take for instance such words and notions which have been specific to Russian political language last 2 years during the war in Ukraine, as Nazism or fascism.
И для этого мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины.
Or even look, Satanism, because Medvedev himself used this word Satanism. That Ukraine is an artificial state, another notion, or such statements as threat from the West or threat from NATO, that this is the civilizational war or war against LGBT, if you wish, things like that. I think this combination of notions, references, can actually be turned 180 degrees back towards Russia itself. I think in overall actions which Russia does against Ukraine can be portrayed and characterized as Nazism, as fascism, even Satanism, if you wish. That's why it is, as I said, very controversial and full of fakes and lies. I think by putting itself against Ukraine and against the West, actually probably a Russian establishment does overlook that actually by such means or messages, Russia appears to be against the entire world, because for instance, I mean by entire world, in particular the United Nations. We know that United Nations adopted several resolutions against this war, warning Russia against these actions, blaming Russia. So in this sense, international community itself fully against Russia. Remember that during the voting process in the United Nations General Assembly, only 4 or 5 states supported Russia openly. Others were either against majority or just abstained. That's why we can say that Russia probably must, as you know, the Russian proverb says, look at him at itself, finds some evils inside Russia instead of blaming the entire world. So probably briefly, I will stop here and we'll listen to Elden's remarks. Just the last point. But in this statement, Medvedev, was so, how to say, self-confident to speak on behalf of Ukrainians. Look, he said that Ukrainians, it's better for Ukrainians to live together with Russia, whether they like it or not. So otherwise, Ukrainians will, I paraphrase, of course, take a risk of a constant war with Russia. So he appeared to be so knowledgeable about what Ukrainians think, and taking care of Ukrainians' survival, something like this. Anyway, he rejected the legality of Russian statehood. And I think from international law perspective, not primordial perspective, international law perspective, it's absolutely wrong and should be, of course, rejected.
Well, what's to stop Medvedev or any of the Russian elite from using the same rhetoric to justify invading other previous Soviet or Russian Empire states, such as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan?
Say it again. Sorry, what stops, you said?
Yeah, what's there to stop them from using that same rhetoric on Central Asian countries if they have such a drive to use it in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think so far, my impression is this is no more than the rhetoric. As I said in the beginning, there were a lot of such kind of statements, not only by Medvedev and by other political people and political circles, including mass media and propaganda channels. So there were, millions of such similar statements. I doubt that finding itself in the quagmire in Ukraine, Russia will dare to repeat such adventure elsewhere in the former Soviet territory, be it Baltic or Caucasus or Central Asia. I think, again, this is a guess, this is my impression, the more they fail or feel themselves in the deadlock in Ukraine, the more they press on such a bold, aggressive, humiliating rhetoric, because probably such aggressiveness in words, in expressions, substitute the military failure in Ukraine.
So I would like just to add some particular remarks to the question on Russian rhetoric. So I think we should take care, we should pay more attention to three main, maybe from my point of view, reasons of such rhetoric from Russian politicians. So the first reason from my side is a fear-mongering. The second is distrust between politicians of former post-Soviet countries. And also the third point is some sort of hopelessness of Russian foreign policy in this area. So thinking about the first point about fear-mongering, I think that regarding the upcoming elections in Russia, political elites try to somehow, let's say, to rally the public and political figures around certain policies, yes, especially those that might be controversial or require significant resources, like military interventions, or to increase defense spending, or to increase popularity of Putin, for example, towards the Russian population. So I think that after the war in Ukraine started, identity of Russians started changing. Yes, so maybe they try to identify themselves more with the state. I'm speaking about people who stayed in Russia, who identify themselves with the Russian government, and maybe they maybe like the question of the realization of like the question of Russian language, of protection of the Russian language, or protection of so-called Russian world is on trend in Russia among like just Russian people. So in this regard, they try to raise the popularity among the population using fear mongering. Yes, speaking about some discrimination of Russian-speaking people in the post-Soviet countries, speaking about Ukraine as a particular threat to Russian sovereignty and like to Russia as a country. Speaking about the second reason, which I also raised about distrust, so I think here we have some particular distrust between, for example, Kazakhstan and Russian communities and between politicians, which leads to such, let's say, to some sort of information scandals, yes, like maybe the last one with Dina Kandelaki or some previous statements from Medvedev talking about some other post-Soviet or former Soviet countries. So it doesn't improve relations between Russia and former Soviet republics. And I think that a good example, a vivid example, is various rumors about the opening of any NATO training centers in Kazakhstan.
Mhm.
Just could you imagine anyone seriously believing that, for example, Hungary will open a Russian training base on its territory? So it's here. Kazakhstan is a member of the CSTO, of the Common Security Treaty Organization, and therefore any rumors about the opening of any training bases should not be taken as truth at all. But still, it's here. And I think the main reason is the particular distrust between, as I told you, between Russian political establishment and between, say, our also politicians from Kazakhstan or from other Central Asian countries. So Russia could also particularly perceive some threat from the territory of Central Asia. That's why they also could make such sort of statements, which, as I told you, can worsen relations between Central Asia, between other former Soviet republics and Russia. And the last one was a hopelessness of let's say, of Russian tools to implement its influence in this area. So Russia also understands that it has lack of soft power, yes, for example, to raise its attractiveness among people in these former republics. Maybe people could think more in favor of the European Union, of other Western countries, or like they could perceive more positive Turkey or some other countries. So Russia also understands that it's particular, let's say, a threat to its own influence in the region, and they try to maybe somehow, let's say, to show that they're also ready to use some power just to keep its influence in this region.
Well, you just mentioned the CSTO membership. What are the implications of countries being a part of this organization? And as I understand, Uzbekistan is not a member, correct?
Yeah, it's twicely joined and twicely exited, right?
Uzbekistan exited from the CSTO right in 2012.
2012, right?
So what are the implications for being a member or not a member of it? Does it have any role to play within the dynamics or the relations between Central Asian states and Russia?
It's a defense alliance. So they are all countries, all members of the organization, they're allies. So they actually, in theory, they should rely on each other regarding any military or defense issues. If, for example, another country is not member of the CSTO, attacks, for example, another country, they should like take any measures just to react on it, for example, yes? So this was the idea of the CSTO, just to raise like defense of other, let's say, more military weak states than Russia, for example. Like we know that in Tajikistan, there's a Russian military base, which should defend its border with Afghanistan. And you also remember NATO peacekeeping operation during January protests in Kazakhstan. So different applications.
A couple of words. I mean, just recently, there was an announcement that 5 states, 4 Central Asian plus Azerbaijan, now are planning to conduct a military exercises in the territory of Kazakhstan this year. So it's planned. I think it's not by accident. It's really symptomatic of the time. I mean, I do not exclude that this plan on military exercises of 5 states is should be considered in the context of overall geopolitical turbulences in the former Soviet territory, of course, first of all, in the context of war in Ukraine. Moreover, it is very interesting in terms of the composition of this group of who are planning military exercise. I mean, Azerbaijan has now accumulated great experience in the sphere of military operations, experienced 2 wars against Armenia over Karabakh. That's why this is a very great experience to be shared with Central Asian colleagues, partners, especially given the fact that Azerbaijan, together with Central Asian countries, are the members of another organization of Turkic states. So that's why I think this is very illustrative and symptomatic. Let's wait how they do this. Anyway, this is a sign of their will and desire to coordinate their policies in the sphere of regional security and defense.
Yeah, so I think that Kazakhstan, for example, tries to diversify some partners in military sphere. And we should not also forget that in this year, the CSTO will also conduct approximately 5 or 4 military drills on the territory of Central Asian countries. So yes, from one side, they try to cooperate more with Azerbaijan and maybe to have some experience exchange in the military sphere, because Azerbaijan could has had a war against Armenia. But another thing is to think about is that Kazakhstan, for example, doesn't more conduct any military drills with NATO on the territory of Kazakhstan. The last military drill was in 2019. I don't remember. It's called the State Eagle. Yes, it was like within the partnership between the NATO and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan takes part in some military drills with other NATO members, but outside of the territory of Kazakhstan. For example, in Tajikistan, there were also some military drills with the US and the territory of the US. And also in Turkey, there were some military drills called Kış, winter, and Efes, with participants also, with the participation of other NATO members. So I think it's also a sign. And another issue to think about, that all participants of this upcoming military drills with Azerbaijan, the share of Russian equipment, military equipment, is above 50%. Even for Azerbaijan, as far as I know, according to the data of CIPRI, Azerbaijan were importing military equipment and some other stuff from Ukraine, Belarus, and from Russia. So mainly Soviet equipment and Russian-created equipment.
So would you say that the states that are taking place within this new military exercise, would they be slowly working towards creating their own kind of security organization? Or would it just be those exercises to gain experience and exchange knowledge?
I think exercises of this kind have double message. I think one is that they are concerned about negative trends in the region and around the region. And that's why they try to take care of security jointly and sending a message that they have partners, they have allies, and so on. Azerbaijan, for instance, should not be, in my opinion, perceived just as a single Azerbaijan country, but also as a country which has an ally, Turkey. So behind, let's say, Azerbaijan, there is Turkey. It's also a message because Turkey's presence was always articulated during war between Azerbaijan and Armenia constantly. That's why in this case also we can also perceive somehow the invisible presence, let's say, of Turkey through participation of Azerbaijan in the Central Asian military drills. So this is first aspect. I mean, in terms of message, but in terms of the real security system or organization, I think we can say that it's expedient, it's desirable action. I mean, or desirable future. I mean, if they create the full-fledged regional security architecture, because there were a number of official statements about this. Take, for instance, just I mentioned one among many statements. We until today we have already 5 consultative meetings of Central Asian presidents, and if you open the joint statements, which are always adopted in the aftermath of summits, you can find that they include such provision which says that Central Asian countries will coordinate their foreign policies and will try to coordinate their actions in the sphere of regional security. Who knows, maybe such kind of military drills are just the first steps towards such more ordered, I would say, systemic approach to regional security.
I think if you recall a few months back in China, I believe Xi Jinping proposed that the C5 kind of establish their own security organization, correct?
Exactly. Yes. In Xi'an, if you read the Xi'an Declaration, which was made in May last year, there was a provision which says that China, I mean, probably it was a Chinese proposal that China will assist Central, again, I paraphrase, assist Central Asian states to strengthen regional security in Central Asia. How China can do this is, of course, a big and open question because it is quite, how to say, sensitive, delicate issue that China will be involved in the overall security sphere in Central Asia. In my opinion, Central Asians should prioritize their own regional efforts, regional undertakings to strengthen regional security in Central Asia without great power participation.
Then what would be the biggest threat to Central Asia's regional security? Would it be Russia, Afghanistan, natural resources?
Oh, it's a very big and special question to be discussed separately, probably, because it requires, taking into account so many aspects. Of course, there are some signs of threats from Russia. There is a security challenge from Afghanistan as well. So, of course, it's a more complicated issue to be analyzed.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your days to come and speak with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Nice to meet all of you.
Well, there you have it. Possibilities of a regional security bloc? Who knows? This is Daryo, and I'm Tony. Thank you for watching.